in 1768. It had three main purposes. One was to elevate the status of art and artists in Britain. One was to enlighten the public, to broaden public taste. And the other was to train the artists of the future. Now, all of that's in our mission statement, and all of that's reflected in the new building. And we start with the collections. Now, the Royal Academy has a very quirky collection, 46,000 objects, mainly made up of ephemera, but also work given by previous academicians for the education of the public. And the inaugural hang in our new collections gallery has been done by the current president of the Royal Academy, Christopher Lebrun.
Well, as you can hear, we're installing the collections gallery, which is a very important and rather exciting moment, because the Academy's never really had a proper collections gallery of this scale and magnificence. So we're very busy because there's only a few days left before we open. This is the copy of Leonardo's Last Supper, and it's carried out by one of his studio assistants, Gian Petrino, within, we understand, Leonardo's lifetime, which meant that there's a direct connection between Leonardo and this work. And in a way, because it's a copy of the Great Last Supper, which is in Milan, it comes to the principle of what we're doing here, which is showing how these works were used in the schools, because they were used for teaching purposes. And what better thing to learn from than Leonardo's great masterpiece, The Last Supper. The Last Supper's been hanging in the chapel of Magdalen College, Oxford. And we're very grateful to them for looking after it, but we'd much rather have it back. And I've been campaigning for a space worthy to show this for some years. In fact, many of the pieces are of necessity out on long loan, because we literally just we don't have the space to show them. However, now we do. Not all of them, but certainly many of the great works. Works come into the collection in various different ways. The bulk of the collection consists of diploma works, and they're, as it were, the masterpieces of the academicians given to the Academy to represent them and what they do in the forms of architecture, sculpture, printmaking and painting. But these early pieces, like the Thornhill cartoons, which you can't see, but just here, big copies of the Raphael cartoons, which hang in the V&A, came in as gifts. And the greatest of all was the Tondo, was Michelangelo's Tondo, which is our chief treasure, really. I think it's fair to say.
Interesting and provocative opening to Christopher Lebrun's hang. This work by one of his predecessors as president, Sir Thomas Lawrence, Satan gathering his legions. If you're bemused by what's happening in these nether regions, well, your guess is as good as mine. But for me, the collection really takes off here with a portrait, self-portrait, by the first president, Joshua Reynolds. Here he is in the garb of Van Dyck, with a little nod to Rembrandt, next to a bust of Michelangelo, the artist he most aspires to be. And the idea of elevating the status of art and artists in Britain is here in this picture. Next door is one of the rare women members in the first 150 years of the Royal Academy's history, Angelica Kauffman, one of the founding members. Here she is, sketching this classical bust, the Belvedere torso, and we have a cast of it here in the collections gallery, and a detail of it here in a painting of the General Assembly, with Kauffman herself visible here. Everything becomes secular. Now, these two vast enfilades, or this enfilade rather, of two vast paintings. This is a copy of The Last Supper, probably by Gian Petrino, one of Leonardo's pupils, made, if not within Leonardo's lifetime, within 4 or 5 years of his lifetime. The original, as I'm sure you know, in Milan on the wall of a convent, because it's dry fresco technique, faded almost in Leonardo's lifetime. So details like the feet and the sandals of the disciples really only exist in this work. And at the end of this beautiful sequence of galleries, Michelangelo's Taddeo Tondo, which shows Virgin Mary with the Christ child and the infant St. John the Baptist, who holds what looks like initially an amorphous mass of stone, out of which, though, you can see the form of a bird. The goldfinch, the symbol of Christ's passion, which is probably the reason why the Christ child recoils, because of the inevitability of his death. This beautiful carved marble sculpture is the only one of its kind by Michelangelo in Britain, and it's one of the great treasures in the whole of British art. Now, leaving the galleries, we walk past two of the great Royal Academicians, Turner and Constable, and the triumph not of history painting as Reynolds wanted it, but of landscape painting in the 1820s, which brings me, rather neatly, to the new galleries where a temporary exhibition is being staged at the moment by Tacita Dean, the Berlin-born, LA-based artist. She's British, and she has ruminated on the idea of landscape, and that is in a sense part of a collaboration with the National Gallery, for whom she's done still life, the National Portrait Gallery, for whom she's done portraiture, and the Royal Academy, for whom she's done landscape. But it's landscape in a way you've probably never seen it before. For a start, she works on blackboard, as well as film, as well as her own collections. And so what you see moving ahead are cloudscapes and a mountainscape. And this is the largest work she's ever made on blackboard. It is done simply with chalk. It's over 9 meters wide, 7 meters tall, and it conflates 3 letters from the Alps in Austria in the 18th century, where one avalanche buried a village, another avalanche buried the priest who took the service, the funeral of the people killed in the first avalanche, and the third avalanche saved the priest's life by freeing him. And there's something I think about the process of avalanche and covering and revealing and pushing away that's reflected in the way that Tacita Dean has made this work. She also, as I mentioned, has her own collections here, fragments of landscape. She's been collecting round stones since she was a child, and also 4, 5, 6, 7, 9-leaf clovers, all of which have an obtruse relationship, but a profound one, to landscape. And then in the final galleries of the 3 here, she's made a brand new film. It's a 2-screen film based distantly around the myth of Antigone, and here's Tacita Dean herself explaining the origins of that work.
My sister's called Antigone. She's older than me. It would have been, possibly one of my first 2 or 3 words. So that word has incredible resonance for me. In 1997, I was asked to propose an idea for cinema. And it was the first thing that came to my head, and I had very little time to do it, so I just thought about this unscripted part between 2 Sophocles plays, the end of Oedipus Rex and the beginning of Oedipus at Colonus, and this period in between where Oedipus wanders in the wilderness with Antigone, guided by Antigone, because by then he blinded himself. And I just said I would script this part as a work of cinema, and as cinema is very specifically narrative cinema in this case. And I had the most extraordinary dialogues conversations with cinema professionals of our generation that have now completely died out, including most particularly Stuart Stern, who wrote Rebel Without a Cause. And he said something to me about, why did they wander so long? They wandered so long in order to forget. And talked about, why it took so long for the Jews to escape, to return to Israel, because they needed to forget what it was like to be slaves. They could return as free. The generation who were slaves needed to die, basically. And it was a thing about immigration, basically. So I never wrote it, of course. What I realised profoundly, and actually I probably realised it took this long to realise that I was probably willfully never wrote it, because cinema is not my place. And I think, although I work with film, I never have a sense of the finished artwork. Luck, chance, contingency, all these things that I work with. I don't want to know where I'm going, the sort of blindness of what I do. And so this was a huge gamble to actually make my unmade work. I was in LA, I was surrounded by cinema people. I've become a campaigner to fight for photochemical film. It was all accumulating, and I thought actually, the final thing was that this show is about landscape. It's the wilderness, so why don't I try and do it? But what I have made is far removed from narrative cinema. It's not that at all, and it's not Antigone, the Sophoclean play either. Or is it? It's a meditation on. I don't even know quite how to describe it yet because it's so new to me. But it's definitely about blindness. It's about my blindness. It's about Oedipus's blindness. It's about the blindness of film, because of course it's all made inside the camera. So until it's all exposed, it's built up from various exposures in different places, and only at the end, when you process it, do you see what you've done. So it's complete blindness. So it's the blindness of the medium, but the ultimate blindness is the blindness of nature, because the clock in the film, the time in the film, is an eclipse of the sun, total eclipse of the sun. I mean, I did not know what it would be, and at a certain point I realised I had to defy cinema by making it unshowable, by making it double, like two eyes. The big experiment of this show is the film, and I haven't seen it myself yet. I mean, I've of course seen it, but not seen it unstretched and running simultaneously. I have not seen that myself. So we are running. It's quite frightening. That one is a work that's going to take a long time to even sort of settle in my own soul, really.
Well, Antigone is installed, and I have to tell you, it looks fantastic. Now, this is another highlight for me of the new Royal Academy, a purpose-built lecture room, the Benjamin West Lecture Room, named after our second president. And this enables us not just to do lectures and debates twice a week, we can do it almost whenever we want. And we're going to do lots more artist talks, in conversations, symposia, debates. We're going to do a festival of ideas at the beginning of September, where people from across the arts, from the choreographer and dancer Tamar Rocco, to the photographer David Bailey, to Gilbert and George, to Lauren Child, the child's author, to a whole range of other people who will come in here and talk. And our whole learning activity, school children, cradle to grave, is going to be enhanced, I think by about 50%. Now, this is the work of David Chipperfield, Sir David Chipperfield, an architect who has done extraordinary things all around the world, particularly in Berlin, transforming museums. And that's what he's done here. And architecture moves centre stage now at the Academy. Architects were part of our foundation. These are casts and capitals from the architectural cast collection. These are here for the education of the public and for students. But also, we're just installing here, there's a fridge going on there. If you think this is actually for an entertainment, you're wrong. This is part of the invisible landscapes sequence of projects. This is the architecture studio. There is in fact a functioning bathroom and lavatory out there with a flagpole between them. This will open in a couple of days' time, and it gives us a chance to explore in a more expansive way the role of architecture and the overlap with contemporary art. Back into the main foyer of Burlington Gardens, the Chipperfield restored building. And I just want to start talking a little with you about how the Academy feels now like a collection of buildings. We have this building by James Pennethorne. We've got David Chipperfield's linking. We've got Sidney Smirke's conversion at the back of Burlington House, the original Royal Academy. And as the noise crescendo gets bigger, we're going to start the journey through to the original Academy building, or the building that we moved into in 1868. So, this space here, the Ronald and Rita Macaulay galleries, is beautifully empty and calm. But this is a project space. Grace and Perry will install the fun room here in the summer exhibition. And then in September, Bob and Roberta Smith will do the first of a series of annual projects here. And then we go through to one of these surprising moments, David Chipperfield's bridge, where suddenly you see the two buildings and the schools. And at the heart of this place has always been art schools. And the schools themselves are visible down the stairwell. Those are the schools gallery with work by first-year students. The viewer will cross the schools, and this is all free. Whoever wants to come here to look can do so. And then into the vaults, which links to Burlington House. And in the vaults, there are yet more objects from our extraordinary collection, including one particular object that two illustrious historians have just been discussing.
This is one of the most famous ancient images of Hercules that there are. It's a plaster cast of the so-called Farnese Hercules, found in the baths of Caracalla in Rome, and must once have been one of the big pieces of bath decoration.
It's totally magnificent. I mean, I love Hercules, the Hercules story. It's one of my kids' favourites when we're reading our Greek myths. He's leaning on his famous club, and it looks to me like he's got the skin of the Nemean lion draped over his club.
This is Hercules just after he's done his final labour. So we're not seeing the tough, on top of it all Hercules. What we're looking at is the weary Hercules. Hercules can barely stand up and he's having to support himself on his club. There's a nice little trick, because Hercules has got his hand behind his back. And when you see sculptures like that, you always say, look, the sculptor is wanting me to go round behind to find out what that hand is doing. And if you do go round behind the back of Hercules, what you discover is in his hand are some apples, a nice symbol of what many thought was his last labour, when he went and he picked the golden apples from the tree of the Hesperides and brought them back. So we know for a fact that this is Hercules having done his job.
He is the victim of fate. He is the victim of appalling injustice. And yet, through courage and wisdom and wit, and with enormous patience, he keeps going and completes his labours. And there is, for all the suffering we endure, for all our labours, our daily labours, there is, at the end of the tunnel, peace to be found.
So there you have it. It's taken a Herculean effort, if you'll excuse the pun, to get the Royal Academy open in this, our 250th year. What we now hope we have is the most exciting, animated cultural campus right in the heart of London, linking Mayfair to Piccadilly. It's open to all, and it opens this Saturday. So if you're going to the Royal Wedding, come before or after. If you're watching the Cup final, certainly come before. If not, come on Sunday. Everyone's welcome. Thank you for joining me.